Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for the 2020 Tin House Resident Readings. I'm India Downs-LeGuen, the Assistant Director of Tin House Workshops, and I'm so honored to be here tonight with 6 readers who I deeply admire: Ashia Ajani, Jari Bradley, Fajardo-Anstein, Felita Hicks, Kieran and Abby May Otis, as well as our 2 incredible interpreters, Mac McClendon and Rory Burton. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our program, in 2019, the Tin House Workshops expanded to add several month-long residencies to provide authors with a place to write, revise, or maybe just think. Sadly, this year has been a tough one for travel, and though we didn't get the chance to meet all the residents in person, it meant so much to spend time with their work and to continue to support it from afar. One exciting result from the unexpected restructuring are the virtual craft intensives. Each resident reading tonight is teaching a 3-hour online class taking place throughout the month of October. It's truly an amazing and timely and original bunch of craft intensives, and I'm really happy to say that applications are still open. You can head to our website for class descriptions and the link to apply. And finally, before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to send support to really everybody, but especially those that are tuning in on the West Coast. We're on, day 5 of just incredible smoke, and I hope that joining together tonight in the reading to listen and share can provide a bit of solace or maybe just distraction. So I'm very excited to announce our first reader, the poet Ashia Ajani. Ashia describes themselves as writing as a queer Black femme. They work to preserve, interrogate, and imagine how the Black diaspora has shaped and continues to shape land stewardship in the Western Hemisphere. They've published in the Journal, Sage Magazine, Sierra Magazine, the Hopper Magazine, and Foglifter Press, among others. They're a 2019 PEN America Writing for Justice Finalist, and they released their first chapbook, We Bled Like Mango, in October 2017. Ashia, thanks so much for being here. Oh, you're on mute.
I always do that with Zoom. You'd think that I would get used to Zoom after being on it for so often, but not really. But I'm super excited to be here and to be a part of this just spectacular lineup. And I'm looking forward to hearing the other readers. So I'll just jump into it. This first poem is called Landfill. In the morning, the ghosts are listless. The world goes quiet without preamble. Pray to all the gods who look like me and to the ones who don't. Even the faceless deities have a place here. Grocery bags fossilized into quilt, cough drop wrappers, a tooth, all organs built of silicone and rupture. A minstrel cup, pretend to use for 3 years prior, croons its tongueless lullaby alongside saran wrap stained auburn with turmeric and grease, carved out belly fat, neon razors, bloody underwear, a pinch of his pubic hair, acrylic nails complete with bits of skin and cartilage. How do you save smoke? Testament to ancestors worn and discarded like scraps of cloth, headless baby doll and 12 used condoms, broken brassieres that remind me of my ex-girlfriend. God knows how many broken combs, brushes, Hicks, pluck permanence in this brown-green slime. Prescription pill bottles my mother says not to dispose of in this way. Nothing dies here. That is the purpose of stuffing a landscape full of rubbish. There are no parts that exist devoid of motion. Everything has an origin, and maybe that doesn't mean as much as we would like it to mean. Bear witness to the slow decay. This next one is entitled God Save the Forest. I didn't intentionally spurn the forest. Rather, it became another question of Southern belonging I didn't have the patience to unravel. Must have been when the little white kids next door asked if we wanted to play cowboys and Indians, and all I could think about was the split in my Concord DNA that stood on both ends of the fastening rod. Or maybe when a man held a shotgun to the back of my mentor's head while we were out in the field asked, "Whose land you think you on, boy?" Neither of ours. We just learned to love it because it was the only thing that granted us some semblance of peace. My mentor says he has encountered poisonous snakes in the Panamanian jungle, and this scared him less than doing research in the deep South. Snakes are usually more frightened by you than you are of them, Same goes for white folks, but Lord, how I prefer a fang to those trigger fingers. I didn't intentionally spurn the darkness until they claimed ownership of that which once sheltered us. When all that was hunt and run soaked my endings in bloodlust through this violent cat and mouse condition. The inherent trickery of my blood begged me to stay grounded when all I could imagine was flight. The voices in these woodlands are alive and they carry a vengeance. And maybe this is why white people fear the dark and what it holds. We marvel at its ability to hold, call it semantics, a cultural linguistic loophole, our right to something. Abuela weaves together sweet tales about the backwoods that were once hers. Long after the plantation manifestation made a mockery of her inheritance. The trees held their secrets with rope and flame, but I can't help but envision my abuela laughing, running not from any one thing, but towards the witching hour our foremothers once found refuge in. Mississippi is a graveyard of all my kin's wildest ambitions. We play pretended Americanness until it felt real enough to sink into, until it didn't defend us from the light, until the superfund affliction reminded us of the well-earned savagery in our marrow. I flee from what my ancients trusted, and isn't that the most heart-wrenching betrayal of my blood? To deny myself access to the blackest parts of this earth. My great-great-great-grandmother's phantom footsteps litter the ground like dead leaves. And isn't that what this lineage always returns to? This ill-understood trauma of existing in between shadow and soul? Tell me, what is the difference between haunting and protecting a place? Is it one of volition? The wounds down here are older than the flesh that displaced them, but the twilight reminds me that we could feel whole yet. Black people in the South breathe life into dark and call it home. Black as the soil that birthed bright cotton, this Mississippi Delta madness home, this wild, expansive blackness home. Mississippi baby, on my good days, I imagine you soft and lazy, draped in all that green, all that darkness, all that unloved Black. Yay, shout out to anyone from Mississippi tuning in right now. That's where my mom's side of the family is from. And I miss it a lot. This next one is called Durag. Forward moving, we always turn back time. Like ocean built of body, memory, the God of good grease paints follicles holy, and those waves, Lord, those ancient waves, facilitate a brother's boldest baptism, wipe me down, a litany of all the good that came to stay. The Atlantic remembers every part of Black anatomy, like a curse, a calling, those cold waters shift and stagnate under a cotton polyester blend. They never got to lay claim to the water, but by God, how they damned, privatized, seized, overfished, extracted, deregulated, poisoned, commodified, pulled the stocking from the crease quick, like a run in a stocking, ripped the color clean from scalp. An instantaneous divide reminds what can be taken and what can be absolved. Later, a Black boy will fit his mouth around the word rage, hold it behind his tongue, ferment his brooding into savage. Watch him pull bones from the riverbed, casting wide mesh drenched in cotton coagulations. Pray for summer rain to rinse all these trifling transgressions clean. Any flood breaks a bullet's back, but does not siphon the blood back into body. Baby, I can't help but enshrine you of the vengeful sea god, drowning in all that drip, all that sheen. This next to last one is Ode to Left Eye. Left Eye is a Gemini, I'm a Gemini. There's a lot of similarity between me and Left Eye. So this is Ode to Left Eye. Looking down a waterfall in La Ceiba, Left Eye, nude and alive, uttered, when I was a kid, I wished all of this. I can't help but tease out the irony in getting all you ever wanted mere days before your spirit quits this earth. Maybe it was those different personalities begging to be released from a constricting vessel, Gemini that she was, never satiated by what could be obtained, always fascinated with the beyond, the crass, the unexplainable aching within us all. I'm afraid I have already lost what is most dear to me and can never retrieve it. I promise you, if I could isolate the nucleus of my pain, I would pluck the disease from its root and bury it. Even as Left Eye watched a house consumed in a conflagration of her own creation, she couldn't placate the parts of her that wanted to go down with the wreckage. A penchant for flight burns deep in our shared spirits. As she held the leather soles of another Lopez, These wild premonitions of departure etched one in her flesh. I too see dangerous things and try to pay them no mind. You give power to a thing when you name it, so I wander aimlessly, ripping titles from the haints that follow me. I turn a new face to the sun, eager to stretch my inflamed spirit beyond temporary pleasure. Sometimes instinct is the only source of truth worth listening to. Thank you so much for having me. This last one is called I Still Won't Get My Hair Wet. Growing up in Colorado, I never was a water-connected person. Besides, my bloodline lacks proclivity towards moisture, though these lungs know nothing but flood. The cold water will swallow you whole, and where will you be without this landlocked abandon? Grandma chides when I venture a new baptism and snaps on my swim cap tight enough to knock my perm bruised edges loose. She says the chlorine clean makes it pure enough for plunge, knows Mississippi murky water for what it really hides. As we buy back our health, a purloined possession, this kind of thirst summons an ancient lust. We've been parched for centuries. In secret, I seek to swim, cloaked by what carried and buried my bloodline. I am still hot with no eagerness to splash and cool off, unduly capable of a different kind of flow. Years ago in the wild edges of Missouri, my paternal grandfather throws my adolescent father into Smithville Lake, shouts swim. If they come for you, you gotta know how to float. If they come for you, you better hold your goddamn breath. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashia. That was wonderful. Wow. All right, our next poet is Jari. Jari Bradley is from San Francisco. Jari has received fellowships from Callaloo, Cave Canem, and Tin House. They serve as poetry editor of the University of Pittsburgh Literary Magazine, Hot Metal Bridge, and their work has been featured in Huffington Post, in Blavity among 15 creatives in the Bay Area you should know, and in places like Callaloo, Hot Metal Bridge, Nomadic Ground Press, the Virginia Quarterly Review, and Punctum Books, Anti-Racism Incorporated. Why the way we talk about racial justice matters. Jari, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Before I start, I want to thank Tin House for the support, the resource, and the ability to continue to do this work. And so without further ado, I will read. This first poem is entitled Dysphoria. I say, boy, not sure if I mean myself or an undoing, a slippage of sex, but always meaning a tender violence or child's play, a way of becoming. I say, boy, and mean a small god of making, an appraisal of my bad shape. Its favor of the blood that does and does not come. Dysphoria is what it is called when I say I don't care for my breasts, or is what I mean by they get in the way. I say man and mean hunger, or twin tongue, a kin taste for cruelty, stalled at the sight of the first wound. I say heal and mean to keep the dogged fear at bay as its hands tear into my hefty frame, persistent until I feel a pit opening inside me. I say, girl and mean, Lord, have mercy on those days where I didn't deserve any of it. Have mercy on how weak I believed I was. The second poem is entitled Wayward. As a child of refusal, I wanted a say in my own pleasure. In my youth, where the dark gave way to flesh, I decided to draw a line against just how much woman I'd be. My body spread like any field on fire, a wilding, or what could burn an entire house down. Beginning in that bedroom, the pallet on the floor, my mother's begging from the next room. If I were made to face a fist. I was determined to take it without flinching from the stupid boy who was stupid solely because he never grew suspicious of why I allowed his hands after all, why my mouth rose to meet his, why I held it there, my small searching hand, reaching for the back of his neck, for a knowing of his soft skin, my curiosity of bruise. How far is the line between instinct and routine? There are only two options when you straddle flesh's fence, to break or to make amends. This poem is entitled The Body's Question after Tracy K. Smith. Was a question of my nature. Why no blood at the start? I was no good at girlhood or submit, though I did surrender to the animality of adolescence. So much hair and sweat in the wrong places. The humility in all that unknowing proved I could be a thing of my own making, named to exist what had yet to be. Meant wearing sir and finding I could keep a secret, that I could refuse an answer. Involuntary exits for Carice Lewis. I am a child of wayward fruit, trying to touch a violence. Its bruised shape, a mirror of my own dark face and hers. Another black butch has been left to die by fire this time, and I pray to become smoke, to suffocate or signal someone's boyish child gone, missing, left to rot in that low-lit alley where it is said dykes don't die. I chew on that lie, become full of its poison and spit until the ground opens, humming my name. Who comes for us black boys, us bull dykes bludgeoned into the earth by familiar men gone ravenous behind something about our sex? The wet slit between our legs, a way station for involuntary exits from the body. The splintered crackle of bone, it's backward muscle music, it's queer gospel, some man's killing anger. This poem is entitled Another Way to Enter after Cameron Awkward Rich. I think door, and the dark submits to bruise light. Some people will say, I love you, then leave. I think absence and step inside a field of ache. Hear the rhymes of my girl body, shed all four of her limbs, winged, her nature undone, beneath tall insoluble stalks of husked memory. I kneel next to the child and see another way to enter the wound. This poem is called Transmogrification. I emerge from the eye of a man's hunger, quadrupedal and measured, self, untethered from the self. I have no memory of the happening, only a wilderness, a wildness struck in my blood. I am a child gone feral in the night of a man's primal urge, violation, its black expanse star-mapped, constellation of a man's bruising. Is this the site of metamorphosis? What turned myself outside myself? And this last poem is entitled Unruly. 1. Hushed whispers in an undisclosed room. Take it out of the girl. A child, boyish in nature, their smallness magnified, outcasted. The soft-bodied animal you are, determined, unruly animalia. What survives inflation and inertia? The body is a set of complex feedback systems. Nothing is as it appears. The coexistence of a beard and breasts, evidence of the body's willfully defiant nature. The body's resilience amid the promise of perish somehow. The child survives their own hand. The day's weary edge inverted toward grace. A child, boyish in their nature and barrel-shaped, survives, sedimented against the residue of dunes, soil, leaf litter, and the bodies of a lesser. What couldn't be excised? Your boyish nature, your untamed phylum, your small heart pulsing loud notes against the night too. A boyish child born of brackish water survives on the air of wound. Untamed phylum, a child unruly in its nature, its body, a desolate field of ache, held against a thread of light along the water's edge. Beyond the naked eye, the threat of severance or what the child survives. The body is a set of complex feedback systems. This boyish child, a coexistence of a beard and breasts, taxonomy of smallness magnified. A boyish child treads the water's promise of drown on the air of wound and survives. Thank you so much.
Jari, thank you so much for sharing. Those were really incredible. Our next reader is Kali Fajardo-Anstein. Kali is a National Book Award finalist and the author of Sabrina and Karina. She's a finalist for the Penn Bingham Prize and the Story Prize, and was longlisted for the Aspen Words Literary Prize. Her fiction and essays have appeared in the American Scholar, Boston Review, Bellevue Literary Review, the Idaho Review, Southwestern American Literature, and elsewhere. Kali has been awarded fellowships from Yaddo, MacDowell Colony, and Tin House, and Hedgebrook, and we were really lucky to have her as faculty for this year's summer workshop. Kali, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's reading with me tonight. It's such a pleasure to share space with you. Thank you to Tin House for awarding me this fellowship. It's been an honor. I wish I could come and see you in person. I hope to someday do that again. Okay, so I'm going to read from my forthcoming novel. Right now, the working title is Woman of Light. I don't know if we'll change that. So the section I'm going to read from follows Maria Josie, and she has just left Southern Colorado. She's walked to Denver, and it opens in 1918, and the section is La Llorona. So what you need to know is that Maria Josie is staying in a woman's boarding house, and there's no laundry in the sink, so she's having to wash her clothes in the creek. She came to the underbelly of a stone bridge. It looked as though it had been built in the last decade. Whole blocks of stone were missing like gaped teeth. The bridge had a high sloping arch and what appeared to be a flat, railless surface. It was a transport bridge from one neighborhood to another. A young boy and his father stood above Maria Josie on the bridge's western edge, casting their fishing lines in slow lashes. They spoke a language Maria Josie didn't know. It didn't sound like Spanish or English or the Indio languages she was used to in the Lost Territory. Since coming to Denver weeks earlier, she'd heard Italian and French. Maybe this was Greek, she thought. That could be it. Then, with further consideration, she decided it was Greek. A column of sunlight polished a grassless patch of sand behind Maria Josie. The best I can do, she decided, dropping her satchel onto the ground. Beneath the bridge, water lapped into an alcove of sandstone boulders with a thicket of cottonwood seeds clinging together like spider eggs. Slapping the water with her floral dress, Maria Josie pressed down hard into the cold water, pleading with that man and his son that they wouldn't look at her, washing like a pauper in a creek. Shame. She had rarely felt it before. Now shame controlled her entire life. Maria Josie leaned over the creek and gazed at her rippled reflection. She hated her curled brown hair, her full breast and dull black eyes. She took stock of her body, the unfamiliar meaty thing it had become. The pain in her womb had eased, but the mounds of her breast ached as if they had been gutted and stuffed with stones. Her body disgusted her. Why couldn't she separate from it? Maria Josie then thought of the man she once loved, their last dinner together. He was a German named Hornstein. He sat across from her at the long oak table with his knife and fork gracefully working red potatoes. He was much older than Maria Josie, and when she first shown interest in her at the market on Sundays, she brushed it off as a politeness a certain kind of Anglo man showed toward pretty Mexican and Indian girls. But months stretched on and Horstein cornered her with compliments, firm hands resting against her back, brushing her skin as she reached for jars of molasses, sacks of flour. He'd slip vials of gardenia perfume into her dress pockets, rolled coins into her satchel, until finally, behind her family's back, she swam to him across the river, dividing his section of town from hers. He didn't want to marry me, she later told her sister Sarah. When I told him about the baby, he put something in my food, a poison. Above Maria Josie on the bridge, the man and his son continued to speak their language. It seemed they were in an argument. The boy was goofing off, running around, having trouble sitting still. His fishing line trembled. Careful, La Llorona will get you. As a child, Maria Josie was terrified of the weeping woman who flew through moonlit rivers and lakes, snatching naughty children and drunk, cheating men. Once in the Lost Territory, during a long summer as she swam to Hornstein, Maria Josie thought she glimpsed the water witch, all in black, a Spanish veil shielding her face. She was hunched over, climbing the side of the rock wall like a broken insect. Impossible, Maria Josie thought, and swam faster, so hard it seemed her heart should give out. Maria Josie worked her dress with a bar of ivory soap, her arms hardened and deadened in the freezing water. She imagined she was a machine, thrusting water back and forth, nothing inside her to ache, only gears to rust, trivets to repair. She finished the dress, laying it across a flat, sun-worked rock. The river had an enormous sound then, echoed between the stone-lined banks. The water was blackish and reflecting an evening sun. There were many white gnats in the air, and from where she rested her dress, Maria Josie could clearly see the man and his son on the bridge. The father had gathered their tin pails and poles and carried these things to the creek's banks. The son languidly walked behind, his chin tucked toward his chest. Maria Josie then watched them cast their lines from the grass. Leaning back into her elbows, she pivoted her legs, one tucked behind the other, and watched for a while before starting on her trousers and underpants. The stone lining the river was smooth, gray, pretty like shadows. The father and son were happy in their new spot, and a cottonwood tree released seeds like snow. But then the air turned. Frigid wind rushed from the north, spitting gravel and shards of grass against Maria Josie's face and arm. Darkness curtained the sun, and the wind screeched along the creek's surface. The trees bowed and lost their leaves and weak branches. Maria Josie's hair thrashed in her mouth and eyes, causing tears to roll down her face. A rumbling sound then erupted upstream, a hideous gargling rush. In the Lost Territory every spring, the arroyos flooded in sudden and violent waves. Entire cattle herds were swept away while work trucks floated like toy ducks. Maria Josie noted the creek's height against the stone bridge. She tilted her face to the left, felt the wind change in a flat, tepid way, and within seconds, the stream swelled, bombarded by downstream muck. The water kept coming and coming, endless and dim. It reached the banks, and it pulled the boy into the flood. Maria Josie dove into the rising water. She kicked after the child, her legs tangled inside her long, knotted train of a nightgown. The water was so cold and so deep that Maria Josie was robbed of her breath. With stunned and paused lungs, she thrust herself toward the boy, his dark hair lowering and rising in the murky water. They propelled near a grouping of boulders. The boy seemed almost like a doll. He floated face up, and when Maria Josie finally reached his smooth ankle, he'd lost one shoe and a sock. With both arms, she wrapped herself around the boy's middle, trying to pull his head above the water, but the current, it was too rigid and slick, and she kicked inside her black dress, aiming their connected bodies into a looming boulder. Maria Josie stopped swimming as their backs smacked into the surface. The boy had a young face, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He had long eyelashes and large bluing lips. Maria Josie cradled his head with her palm, guiding them out onto the shore. The boy breathed and his back grew larger against his ribcage, but he wouldn't wake up. Please, Maria Josie shouted in Spanish. Don't die, little boy. You don't have to die, not now, little boy. And she flopped him onto some grass and tried shaking and yanking on his arms and face. And when he didn't wake up, Maria Josie screamed and her throat burned with voice. It felt like a loose patch of her tongue had floated into the sky like a kite. I said, you don't need to die. It's too early. Maria Josie understood then that she wasn't yelling at the boy. She was arguing with death. Somewhere perched on a rock, she was certain skeletal Doña Sebastiana was waiting with her wagon of souls parked along the tree line. Her bag was already heavy enough. She didn't need any more. She wore a long lacy gown too, the hood pulled around her skull, her arms folded like wings. Had she been watching them all along? Maria Josie had felt her hanging around for weeks since the day her baby died inside her, and all she could do was weep. You bitch, said Maria Josie, pulling the boy close and hollering into the wind. Give it a rest, old hag. She halfway lifted the boy into her hip as if he were a toddler she could carry when his father came running down the banks. A roundish man with a kind face, he heaved and cried out for his son. David, he said, David. And the child opened his remarkably green eyes. Weeping with gratitude over Maria Josie, the father said, I'll never be able to repay you. What you have done, I'll never forget. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Collie. It's always such a pleasure to hear you read. Our next reader is Felita Hicks. Felita describes himself as a poet, essayist, and interdisciplinary artist. They're the author of Hoodwitch, a finalist for the 2020 Lambda Literary Award for Bisexual Poetry, the 2019 Balcones Poetry Prize, and the 2019 Julie Suck Award. They have been awarded fellowships and residencies from places like Tin House, Lambda Literary, Jack Jones Literary Arts, and the Right of Return USA. Their work has been featured in American Poetry Review, Cincinnati Review, HuffPost, Long Reads, Poetry Magazine, Slate, Texas Observer, Texas Monthly, and many others. Felita, it's so great to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. Wow, everyone has been absolutely amazing, and I don't have all my words to tell you guys how amazing how much I'm enjoying hearing you read. Thank you, Tin House, for having me. I'm going to read all new work. This is a piece that was published in Vita Lit today. Dog, what the fuck I'm gonna do with a 20? Mr. Floyd's case began with a report of a counterfeit $20 bill that a storekeeper said he tried to pass to buy cigarettes. New York Times, May 29th, 2020. 1 cent. Once, when I was 12, my daddy gave me a 20 for socking a girl in her mouth. I bought a pizza. He gave me another 20 to give to the convenience store clerk when I picked up his OE40. I bought all the books in the Babysitter's Club series. When I was 24, he gave me some advice. Said, ain't no reason no bitch need to be sleeping on no goddamn bus stop bench. Get your shit together. You ain't no fucking loser. He gave me $200 to get my hair and nails did. I bought red heels and went on 4 dates. Sometime later, some white man gave me $20 to suck his dick before dropping me off at the grocery store. When I was 31, I pulled out my last 20 in Jamaica, stuffed that bitch into my shirt just in case somebody stole my shit while I was sleeping on the benches in front of the airport. It was enough for me to get rum before my ride got me later. 2 cents. After 45 days in the county jail, I stand in front of the judge, my wrists still sewn together with silver, my ankles still tied together with steel. And I learned that I owe the county something like 40 20s for my case, and the H-E-B grocery store $24.87 for the original bounce check. We take theft seriously around here. 3 cents. I could get a 20 for 2 spoken word CDs. I could get a 20 if I won the poetry slam. I could get 5 20s if the crowd liked me. I could get 10 20s for my laptop at the pawn shop. I could get 25 20s if I won the contest. I could get 500 20s if I could just get my degree. But here's a question for you. How many cigarettes do you think I could buy with a 20? How many loaves of bread do you think I could buy with a 20? How many packs of ramen could I buy with a 20? How many apples could I buy with a 20? How many cartons of eggs could I buy with a 20? How many mouths could I buy with a 20? How many hours could I buy with a 20? How many years do you think they would let me rot for a 20? So I spent 45 days in the Hayes County Jail for a bounce check. I couldn't afford bail, and the experience of that pretrial incarceration had a profound impact on my understanding of the world and my experience of the world. And so the project I've been working on is trying to look at the system and look at where's the pinpoint of at what point can I make really significant change. And of course, that happens at the first interaction with an officer. This next poem is dedicated to Breonna Taylor. And that's all you need to know. It's dedicated to Breonna Taylor. It's called I Tried Gating Again, like the doctor said, but I don't think I'm ready. Hashtag 2020. They have made this Black body a war I never asked for. The dirt of my skin is peppered with dozens of dying stars. My hands over my head and tied to the eclipse is becoming as rank as old meat from the lockdown market. I do not love what they've made of me. Every time I open my eyes, the swell of my shadow surprises me. I do not recognize this bloated core or these sagging nipples rippling tight back into my soft and ample. I do not recognize the dimpled back half of me, on my crooked spine, on my broken toes. I do not recognize the stern blade of brown over my eyes, or the chapped mouth, or the wagging elbows. In the mirror is an imposter, a liar. Every morning I ask, what happened? Where am I? What happened? Who are you? But whenever the imposter leans to answer, a car hurtles out through a crowd of teeth. Up and over the crease of their lips, indigo goes an eye, cardinal goes the other. All I can hear is a siren, followed by my mother's tears, followed by a siren, followed by my father's tears, followed by a siren, a siren, a siren. Did you know? I'm so sorry, everyone. Did you know the once warm soil of my skin would be enough to grow a guillotine from? Apart from my mouth, this beating body, the heart of the year you were buried in, is all that remains, and barely. Here is my mouth, love, stained. Syringe suck out my lyric, the last of our memory in my chest in a pistol blue. It is all that remains at the end of this decade. Auxiliary, were the sweaty and sun-choked afternoons in which I made my cavernous silhouette, a swirl of sound and suck, there a kiss. Here a medley, but everywhere where I knew you last, every morning, every shower is a new eulogy in your name. If my sex now were an affirmation, it'd be no peace. No peace. How every Black death in the news reminds me of the last time I was loved without requirement. I no longer love to see my body like a bruise on the mattress, like the only place for their pain is somewhere rooted in mean. I have gained 95 pounds. I gorged myself on 87,600 hours worth of news. My chin is heavier now with the bullets pulled from dozens of my sisters. My love, I am nothing like the Black woman you once met by the water. Swimming in my fat neck is the music of the deserted. Their verve, swift and sudden, rushes through the notches and nicks of my cervix while I sleep. I go to the mirror and she is not me, and I am not her, and we are not ourselves. I cannot remember where I left myself. I cannot remember which pocket I stored your ashes in. I cannot find my candlesticks or my lighter or the stone that I came from. I cannot even remember where I am supposed to be right now, let alone what it means to love a pistol emptied of its ammunition. I'm going to take a sip of water and then I have one last poem for you guys. So I work with several different social justice organizations. And right now we're specifically trying to look at how do we start looking at abolition in the state of Texas, and how is pretrial incarceration related to what happens when you end up in a detention center. ICE detainers are a regular occurrence here in Texas. And this is a poem that I hope bridges that conversation between the fight to end immigrant detention and end incarceration. This poem is called A Map of My Want. We are almost there, I tell the women in my backseat making love. The designated driver, they are in my hands. 2 sticky lavender-scented chapsticks melting in my palms. I can still smell them many evolutions later. This is how I want to be remembered. Fucking warm and thick, absolved of my response to anyone's ability to cut me out. Once I was a woman, am now an arc, a memory of exactly where my sisters sank beneath the ruins of themselves, a cloud of unclasped bras and empty pockets. Their husked love is still entangled in the cottonwood branches. The only other kinds of factories they know what it is to be excised in the open mouth of the desert are the kind that live under the coyote willow. We surged north, northeast, listening to each other drip in the silence of the land in between. In the desert, my sisters and I slid up against each other like coins in each other's pockets, different shades, similar values. The more sun we swallowed, the more suns swallowed us. Odd child. Would you believe my first real conversation was with my soiled hands, praying the landscape of my irrigated memory? It's how I know I am from the lake, a dog of the ocean. I was a woman, am now an arc, remembering exactly where my sisters and I sank beneath the ruins of ourselves, the loam of our fatigue, desiccated and unforgiving, a cloud of unclasped bras and empty pockets. We surged through south, southwest, north, northeast, listening to each other bleed in the silence of the land in between. We drove from Lakewood, California to Fort Hood, Texas, from a clogged skyline to the gates of my father's Eden, a continent's worth of dirt and dark potential, a heap of dead wood, dirt, snakes, and dogs in central Texas. We traveled south, southwest, me dreaming of the road-turned river, one of 4 spare tires in the backseat of my mama's whirring machine. My mama didn't like my cousins teaching me to rotate my hips with my hands in California. Bent over the stairs, my back kicking my little nasty ass in the air. Pop, pop. She said, that's how it happens. That's how you become a factory. I've always been a burden of ours. The flesh-dense memory of my mother's ichor, I was always the language of lost time, a percolating wound, driving through some state or another in search of a sleep. I floated away from the shivering concrete of California, the state where I was originally manufactured, in a city strung out on murky neon and pasteurized prisoners, where thieves and killers and pot-smoking dogs lived in cages tall and wide as state-owned buildings downtown, where I learned to load a magazine clip before I learned to borrow sugar. We left, and I knew leaving meant no cages for me, but still, I slept through the first part of the drive mad. I had to meet new people all over again. What about the boy I liked? The one with the eyes colored lilac? I had never met a Black boy with blonde hair and white skin. I thought he was beautiful, but everyone else said he was just a freak, a dog too. I cried. Somewhere in Arizona, I slept through the sound of the other factories I knew were being excised, their frames uprooted and moved in the dark into the open mouth of the desert, their frames easily dying under the coyote willow. When I did finally wake, I was in the belly of Blue Yonder, my body gliding through the tall state walls of Arizona's wide-hipped mountains. I wasn't supposed to know, but I knew that that was what love felt like. A gape in the noise of modern industry, an untested azure, thanking the petroleum that slides through it by holding it in its mouth before graciously swallowing love is the sun's underestimated static, embedding itself into my skin, the melanin, a patchwork of time. The only other kinds of factories that know what it is to be excised in the open mouth of the desert are the kind that live under the willow, the kind that will eat out a poem before they are dragged back into a snake pit. Sometimes they put detention centers far back from the highway, in the back, like the eggs in Walmart. They want to buy everything, but the land, float by without being disturbed. The first boy I felt anything for kisses my sister under a lemon tree. The next boy I feel anything for kisses me on the cheek, never walks me home again. The next boy I feel anything for vomits on my shoes and never says my name again. The next boy I feel anything for again. The next feel for home falls laughing through the door, takes me to twilight, a glass sky stained lavender, tapes a skateboard to my feet and teaches me how to glide. In the Hayes County Jail, there is only one window, and it is the same size as the cheap, worn mystery novel I picked up from the book cart. For weeks, I forget what the sun feels like. I forget I am loved. I forget affection. I pray into a yellow legal pad. I pray into stupid Christian pamphlets. I pray into a steel bed. I pray into my one glass of pasteurized milk or orange juice. I am still praying when I see a wolf's face pop up on Channel 8. He dances, his body swiftly looping around something unmoving. I am crying at all the green. When was the last time I had green? That day, they take us, single file, out into a half court. Someone grabs the mostly dead basketball. Others start pacing around the box. I slip into poems, soothe myself with rhythmic soliloquies, old photos of myself falling out of my mouth and into my hands. When I am finally released, I make it as far as the gas station, a half block away, before rip and stitch. I stand out in the open, suffocating, drowning in the Texas sun, a snake with no est and no eggs and no good meat. To my father, I am an endemic of love. The day's heat, my love. The bark scorpion, my love. The gap between the borders, our love. I am more than this love, a saguaro of love. Whatever my father could have been, it lives in us, me. We have gotten the burden of them both in our body. We were born like this, a cliched concoction of woman, pulling on whatever it was he was before us, a breed of immaculate violence, a woman evaporating in the belly of yet another greedy night. I am the child of a dog, the progeny of a monsoon, a fetish of unadulterated light and cystic hunger, the uncut sky, sick with onyx. We didn't want to know that to be a woman is to always be heavy with someone else's sons. Your sons under our sons underestimated our evolutionary hunger. I bite back. I arc and sift. I am more and less what is known. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Felita. And thank you for sharing new work too. I love to hear new work during a reading. That's really amazing. I'm really happy to introduce the brilliant Kieran tonight, who describes herself as writing about trauma, the body, sports, violence, immigrants, and queerness. She's a Tin House Workshop alumna, as well as a Vona Voices and Las Dos Brujas alumna. Kieran was a PEN Emerging Voices Fellow, a San Francisco Writers Grotto Fellow, an AWP Writer-to-Writer Mentee, a Steinbeck Fellow, and she received a 2019 fellowship from the Vermont Studio Center. Among other things, she is working on her first novel, which I eagerly anticipate. Kieran, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, India. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's been amazing to hear all of this work in progress. I'm going to read part of a short story, and yeah, I won't even read the whole thing, so I'll leave you in suspense. All right, this is called Be Gay, Do Crimes. Arlo traced the faded jade green of Cal's tattoos and watched his skin pull across ridges of solid muscle. He loved the white birthmarks flecked across Cal's back and butt like a fawn, brilliant against his dark skin. This was before Arlo had prison tattoos of his own, before he decided to keep his head shaved so there'd be less to grab in a fight. His body was doughy back then in both color and feel, his skin pale from so much time spent inside, playing video games and reading, his hair a dark curly halo. Every time Arlo woke up next to this man, he was filled with a sense of wonder at how beautiful and soft Cal was, how different he was when sleeping. But Cal wasn't sleeping now, he was talking. He'd started mumbling mid-sentence as though continuing from a dream, but as he got more excited and more awake, he rolled over onto his back. He was like that. When he had a big idea or got excited, he couldn't look at Arlo, he'd talk to the ceiling or the floor. Arlo stared at Cal's lips as he spoke, like aloe leaves, a swollen, fluid tenderness in them, if anyone could look past the shadow of a beard and the jagged ridge of his broken nose. Cal was cool and grown, a real cholo. He probably was telling Arlo a story about something cool and grown he did, something big money. Cal turned to face Arlo and propped himself up on one arm so he was above him, looking down as he murmured a plan. Arlo stared at his curled eyelashes as he talked, which Cal mistook for paying attention. So it would be easy to do again. Cal stroked Arlo's face with the soft swell of his fingertips, especially with some extra help. Huh? Arlo shook his head. Wait. The word sunk in. He sat up on his elbows. Are you for real? Cal had robbed a bank in Colorado and wanted to hit up another in New Mexico. He'd get drunk and joke about it now and then when they were alone, never in front of anybody else. Not that they were in public together much in the first place. Cal had only taken about $5,000 from the Colorado bank and nothing ever came of it. No dramatic car chase, no posters with his face on them, nada. He told Arlo that banks had a certain minimum they just let you take before bothering to call the police. So if you kept it under that amount, say 10 G's per bank, you could go around collecting and all those G's added up. He said the Southwest was the best part of the country to rob banks, though Arlo didn't exactly follow why, especially given the gun-owning population out here. Albuquerque has concealed carry. Burqueños don't play. It's all good, you don't have to do nothing. Cal tried to reassure Arlo, flashed his lopsided smile that made Arlo's breath catch every time. You be the driver, I'll go in, handle it, just like last time. Driver? That wasn't so bad. A driver wasn't a real criminal, more like an accomplice, like they say in the movies. An accomplice was like a little helper, like when mom let him stir the cake batter before she poured the cake into the pan. He couldn't say he baked the cake, and he wouldn't say he robbed the bank. Just helped is all. Arlo had come from a good family, grew up in the Heights, went to an okay school, smoked weed but didn't get into nothing deeper. His parents weren't divorced. He had an annoying little sister. Nothing happened his whole life. Cal was his first well, he wasn't officially a boyfriend yet, but Arlo was sure that in time, well, he didn't want to make assumptions or give it labels. Cal would hate that. After all, he was wild, free, dangerous, exciting. Couldn't lock him down. Cal was an experience, and maybe Cal loved him and wouldn't say it. He didn't seem like the type to say it. Arlo had graduated high school but didn't bother applying to college. Mom told Dad that he just wasn't ready. And while Dad grumbled about it, that was that. Mom called it a gap year, but Arlo saw the blank space extend into the foreseeable future, stretched out vast as that famous Albuquerque sky. Arlo was bored out of his mind. Okay. Arlo brought his forehead close to Cal's, looked him in the eyes, so close he could feel lost and dizzy in them. I'll do it. The plan was simple. Arlo would drive his car, Cal would have the gun, the ski mask, all that movie bank robber shit. Cal would hit him up, only taking what was in the drawers, not messing with the safe. He'd run back to the car with his bag of money, and boom, they'd hit the road, far as they could get, fast as they could get. Then they were free. They could go anywhere to lie low till the heat does what heat does, dissipates. The afternoon was typical late summer New Mexico. Dazzling, alabaster sunlight, whitewashed streets and buildings. Arlo sat in his car. The pleather seat burned through his loose jeans, the air stifling. His AC was broken, so the windows stayed cranked down, but there was no wind. He was sweating bullets. He parked outside Cal's spot, engines running. He honked twice and waited, watched the front door of the casita. His throat felt tacky, sour spit. He didn't want to get out of the car. If he stayed in the car, he was the driver, only the driver, and nothing bad could happen to him in the car. It was cramped for his large frame, but he liked that. As a kid, he used to hide in the closet, literally, haha. He'd hide in the closet with a flashlight and read books, Goosebumps and various choose-your-own adventures that got him scared and wired all night. Back then, being in a small space, surrounded by walls, that felt safe. The car felt like that closet, a place where he could watch the scary things happen outside. Cal walked out the door wearing a baseball cap and reflective aviators, khaki cargo pants, and a bleach-stained orange polo. He slung a navy blue duffel bag over his shoulder, unzipped. Arlo could see gym shoes. What are you wearing? Arlo's voice cracked. He swallowed hard. Be cool. I thought we were robbing a bank, not going to an Isotopes game. Shouldn't you be wearing black? Where's the ski mask? It's all good, Cal said as he got in the car, like he always said. Gotta blend in, man. He lit a cigarette, inhaled, exhaled. All black? Dude, it's bright-ass daytime. What, am I gonna sneak in the shadows? Cal thought about it some more and then started laughing. Oh man, a ski mask. It's 90 degrees out. He started coughing. A ski mask. Can you see me walking in there like, hey, where the snow at? He doubled over in laughter. Cigarette ash fell in gentle powder over the seat and floor. Arlo knew Cal was right, but felt annoyed anyway. He stayed silent as they drove towards the bank, a big one, because they figured the big ones were even less likely to care about a measly 10 grand or so, and they were even more likely to have money up front with the tellers. When Cal eventually caught on to the silence, he placed his hand on Arlo's thigh and gave him a squeeze. Arlo smiled in spite of himself and took a deep breath. Cal made him lovesick. Tonight, when this was over, he'd strip off Cal's shirt and hold him close, skin against skin, and this would be a memory, surreal, a delirious adventure. Cal had done it before. Arlo just had to trust him and drive. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Kieran. Wow, yeah, you really leave me wanting to read the rest of that story. Thank you so much again, Kieran. Our final reader this evening is Abby May Otis. Abby's incredible story collection, Alien Virus Love Disaster, was published with Small Beer Press in 2018 and is a finalist for the Philip K. Dick Award. She's received fellowships from the Michener Center for Writers, the MacDowell Colony, and the Vermont Studio Center. She's at work on a novel about climate catastrophe and post-mass incarceration. This is not a wasteland. Abby, it's wonderful to have you with us tonight. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Thank you so much, India, for emceeing, and Lance and Tin House for putting this together. And thank you also to all these other amazing readers who I've never done a Zoom reading before. I was kind of imagining I needed some sort of green screen with like special effects. But thank you for all the readers who went before me, giving me all these beautiful examples of like bringing me exactly into your world, just with your words and nothing else. And thanks also to the ASL interpreters who I wish I were watching right now because I've never seen ASL of my own story, but I would get so distracted by that. This is very strange with no audience. I really miss seeing all the people who are tuning in, and thank you to you also. And I hope you get chances to move your body during this because screens are hard on the body, right? I'm gonna read just part of a short story, which is always the short story that I go back to when I am finding myself solely powered by rage, which is how the last few months have been. And it was also originally published in Tin House, so that's fitting. Yeah, I'm just reading the beginning of it. It's called Rich People. Nobody stopped me. I smiled at the doorman like we were old friends. I followed the other guests and walked like I knew exactly where I had to be. The hallways were dim and reddish. Sometimes I made wrong turns and had to double back. Even then, I walked surely. As I got further into the house, there were more people about and a deep humming pervaded the air. Some guests had hooks embedded in their necks and shoulders that trailed long, graceful streamers. The flickering sconces made everybody look like stained glass saints. Finally, I reached the ballroom. Usually, such places are a disappointment, but here the floor was a rink of gold. The walls soared up, the ceiling obscured by vapor and heat. Everywhere people stood and spoke to each other, their mouths bright clots of blood that slid around their faces. I moved through the crowd and caught flecks of conversation like insects in my hair. She's really opening herself up to the opportunity of this country, someone said. That submarine is just not a joy I want to live without any longer. So this was the hum. It was as though they were putting on a show for me, though they were not. Even their most unguarded selves were a sumptuous performance. I felt awe. It felt as though I were descending deeper into my own brain. Anything I could think of existed somewhere in the ballroom. I saw a woman so laden with diamonds she had to bend over and crawl on all fours. The strands of diamonds hung down all around her body and over her head, making her look like a shaggy, sparkling dog. A butler stepped into my vision, offering to squeeze truffle oil into my mouth from a dropper. I let it fall on my lips and then thought, why the hell not? I kissed his meaty neck with reverence. Under his skin, his pulse deferred. A knot of people next to me laughed dangerously. One young man held a knife in his palm. Everyone backed away from him, licking their lips. He pinched the spine of the blade between his thumb and forefinger and flung the knife high up into the night. It vanished into the darkness, and he was so rich. Everyone was so rich that it never came down. How rich were they? Here's how rich. Rich enough that they could live forever and never be hurt by anything, or else rich enough that they could be hurt by everything and never need to worry. Some people there were even rich enough that they could slice off little bits of their own flesh and serve it to their friends on top of rice balls like sushi, and they nibbled each other, and then there were little gilt comment cards on which they rated their friends based on freshness and tenderness of flesh, superlative mouthfeel, choiceness of cut. I stood by the buffet tables and watched two young people descend into a quarrel over the poor ratings they had given each other. They rolled their eyes and sneered, their lips still flavorful with the fat of the other. A tall man next to me laughed. You see? He rested the fingers of one hand on my elbow. No friendship is so strong. It cannot be destroyed by ratings. I told him I didn't know what he meant at all. I asked him, where were the foods that allowed you to forget everything in your life before the moment of biting down? That will take a long time, he said, and then he used some of his money to go talk to people more interesting than me. At the other end of the buffet, there was a table piled with whole roast chickens, hundreds of them, bodies gleaming with crispy fat and smoke-infused salt and crackling herbs, stacked into a pyramid that towered over my head. The smell was nearly sexual. There was an attendant nearby who looked like every part of him was tucked into his pants. His job was to ensure that when guests came to choose a chicken, they did not choose one from the bottom of the pyramid and so cause all the rest to tumble down. I went over to the table, and the attendant helped me to select a hen from the top. What will you name it? He asked. Can I distinguish myself by refusing to give it a name? No. Many people have already done that. I named it Voltarine. There were various pins you could affix to your chicken to make it unique. I chose 2 pins that looked like long-lashed eyes and stabbed them into my chicken's breast. People carried their chickens by inserting a fist into the body cavity and balancing it like a puppet on their arm. And when they encountered another person with a chicken, they would both bobble the chickens around on their fists, and they made different voices for their chickens and have them converse about current events or philosophy or other scintillating subjects. Grease and herbs dripped from their elbows. A woman who had been ironed flat nudged her chicken coyly against mine. She had affixed a pair of bright red lips and a rainbow flag to her chicken. But how else can we possibly be enjoying ourselves when other people elsewhere are so sad? Her chicken, asked mine. I was flooded with terror that I would be found out, but I summoned strength to quell it and forced my chicken to speak. Impossible. Pleasure is the only kind I want. Her chicken laughed. How of the now? My chicken understood then that there was nothing she could say that would distinguish her from the rich chickens. There were no beliefs she could espouse more extreme than the beliefs they could adopt for fashion. My breath came more quickly, and I tried to remember why I had come here. The woman raised her chicken to my lips. Would you like? Per etiquette, I took a big bite from the thigh. I raised my chicken up and she took a bite in kind. The flesh was perfect, juicy, redolent with flavor. I ate more, trying to submerge my fear. We stood linked together in a circle, scraping with our teeth, ravenous, altered. Thank you.
so much, Abby. That was awesome. I'm so thankful to all the residents for coming together tonight, for taking time to read, to the interpreters, Mac and Rory, for working with us, and to everyone tuning in. Thank you again. I'm sending you all warm wishes of care and comfort. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.